This week, royal biographer Hugo Vickers joins me to explore the similarities or differences between Meghan Markle and Wallis Simpson. I mean, two women that absolutely captivated the globe. Hugo, you are a level expert when it comes to talking specifically about Wallis. Can you?
All right, let's unpack this conversation. And wow, there's a lot here. This episode of Crown and Conflict dives into one of the most fascinating historical comparisons: Meghan Markle versus Wallis Simpson. Two American women who shook the royal establishment to its core decades apart. But according to royal biographer Hugo Vickers, who literally slept in Wallis's house in Paris and spent years studying her, that comparison? It's pretty much nonsense. Let's start from the top.
Before we get, I'm going to go rogue in a second and ask you about Prince Harry because I'm honestly curious as a friend to hear what your opinion is here. But can I get a little bit about your backstory when it comes to Wallis Simpson? You slept in the same house that she slept in at one point. I mean, you have an incredible history when it comes to Wallis.
Well, I was very lucky because when I was very young, I was sent over to the house in Paris to get a simple biographical bit of information, really, about the Duke and Duchess. Actually went there in May 1972, the day before the Queen visited him. And so the house was in a fever of activity, and people were ringing up the whole time, and it was all very dramatic. And of course, he died 10 days later. I was on duty for his funeral, lying in state. And suddenly the gentleman usher said, "We have a huge problem. The Duchess's secretary is coming over and none of us know what she looks like." And a little bit like a figure in Oliver Twist, I said, "Oh gosh, I met her last week." What? You know, then they said, "Well, you look after her." And she said to me very politely, "If ever you come to Paris again, do come and see us." And of course, I took that as a golden opportunity, made friends with both the private secretaries, and got rather involved in the whole saga of what happened to her after the Duke died, which led to a book that I wrote, which is called at the moment Behind Closed Doors, and has inspired the new film, which is coming out shortly, called The Bitter End, with Joan Collins and Isabella Rossellini, which will be an amazing film, which we must all look out for.
Oh, Joan Collins. I mean, the woman is aging backwards. You've spent time with her too recently due to this book becoming a movie, right?
Yeah, I'm not allowed to talk about it, but yes,
Oh, well,
yes.
does she look as good in real life? Well, actually, I did. I met her at the King's coronation. She does. She does look as good in real life as she does on the big movie screen. She's incredibly gorgeous and she's very smart and she's kind.
She's terribly nice. She's much nicer than her dynasty image, which perhaps has made people think that she's that sort of a person. No, she's very, very nice and very, very switched on.
Oh, you know what
And
else? You worked with her years ago on an episode of Larry King Live about Charles the King's
I,
wedding to Queen Camilla.
I did
Yes,
I'm
I think you were in London, satellite. Dickie was in London, satellite. I don't remember where Joan was, but Joan Rivers and Joan Crawford were on this episode defending King Charles and Queen Camilla about their wedding.
Joan Collins, Joan Rivers, certainly, yes. And of course, when you were on Larry King Live, you always had to be looking into the screen, even if there was somebody sitting next to you, because he did these little boxes. So I did appear on that with people like Nancy Sinatra, and Joan Rivers was again incredibly. She was incredibly nice. I met her in New York because I happened to be there. Normally, we did it at 2 in the morning, so you needed a brick to hold your head up, because it was always live at 9 o'clock from New York time. But then when I was in New York, I did it at their time. That was much easier.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that that was a bit of a break. All right, so I warned you that I was going to go rogue, or rogue before we get into Wallis Simpson and some of her history. There's another conflict that continues to dominate headlines, and that's Prince Harry versus the royal family. What do you make of the headline that's circulating pretty aggressively? It's been happening over the last 48 hours that Prince Harry secretly paid tribute to Prince Philip on the 80th anniversary of VJ Day. I think we might have a different definition of the word secretly than the author of this original headline, because if it's that much of a secret, we shouldn't know about it. And so quickly, Hugo.
Well, yes, I mean, he was prevented some years ago from having a wreath laid on his behalf at the cenotaph, which of course he used to do before he shoved off. And the reason for that was you're either in or you're out. You can't be both. And to have somebody plant a wreath sort of surreptitiously, shall we say, rather than secretly, um, that's very sad. And I must say, I don't think Prince Philip would be terribly impressed by what Prince Harry's been up to recently. He handed over the Captain General position of the Royal Marines to him, which is a very, very distinguished position. And that, of course, has just been thrown away because you can't be Captain General of the Royal Marines, as I've said before, if you're lying barefooted under a tree in California, as he was shortly afterwards.
Smoking a bowl. You know,
Exactly.
but what I thought was so, well, first of all, don't forget that the first year he was rejected from
Hugo Vickers isn't just some royal commentator you find on breakfast TV. He's a guy when it comes to Wallis Simpson. He's been to her home, written books about her, and even inspired a movie about her final years called The Bitter End, starring Joan Collins and Isabella Rossellini. By the way, he's met Joan Collins several times, and yes, she's apparently every bit as glamorous and sharp as she seems on screen. No diva vibes, just old school Hollywood class.
Lying the Wreath. He did that horrific photo opportunity in an American cemetery, and it was so vulgar and embarrassing and contrived, which I think that this is also vulgar, embarrassing, and contrived because we only know about this because someone wanted us to know about this. And it feels intentional because you and I have been some of the biggest cheerleaders in reminding the world that the Queen and Prince Philip's twilight years were disrupted immensely by these two. They could not, I mean, I doubt they had a peaceful sleep in the last few years of their lives with threats of spare hovering over their heads. Prince Philip in the Oprah Winfrey interview, the Netflix series, was constant bickering and he said, she said being leaked in the press from Harry and Meghan in the lead up to the deaths of both Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth. And this feels like somebody who's just trying to change the narrative.
And of course, you remember that the Oprah Winfrey interview was actually broadcast when Prince Philip was very seriously ill in hospital. I mean, that was absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, it was. It was. So do you agree that this was a strategic move PR? It's more of a strategic move PR wise and less about a grandson remembering his grandfather. I'm being asked about an olive branch. Is it's an olive branch from Prince Harry? And I'm like, well, I need a second to get my barf bag.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you either do the one thing or the other, and I mean, it's a kind of slightly creepy, to get somebody to go and put a wreath down when you've been told that you can't have one laid on your behalf, when everybody else is laying them and all that sort of thing. No, it's awful. It's really
Classic,
awful.
classic defiance. Well, let's talk about Wallace Simpson because even here on this channel, I've had several people compare Wallace to Meghan Markle. And you're actually one of the only authors that I've spoken to that really studied her that said, I don't know if that's fair and I don't know if that's true. So much around Wallace is myth that was likely perpetuated to justify the exile, to justify, kind of shoving them away, and trying to pretend like they didn't exist, Wallace and Edward, after the abdication. Can we talk about some of those myths?
Yes, of course. I mean, the only thing that she has in common with Meghan Markle is the fact that she was American, and she'd been
Divorce.
married.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the over and done with. That's it. That's the only comparison. The awful thing is that if you get involved with something like the abdication, people can say anything about you and they will make up anything. It'll sort of be believed. I mean, even the Queen Mother rather encouraged the myth that she was the woman who stole the king. No, she wasn't. My reading of history is that she was fascinated to be the king's friend, and I don't really mind what interpretation you put on the word friend. It was very exciting to be in London, to have the king coming to dinner, to have footmen bringing round flowers and gold plate, and to have all the most distinguished people of the day longing to be at your table in order to get to the king and meet him and talk to him. Very exciting. But the thought of being the wife of the exiled king, the most hated woman in the world. No, that didn't appeal to her at all. And she always thought that, he'd had a number of sort of girlfriends before, and they got dumped at a certain point, and he moved on to another one. And she, I think, thought, she would be there for a while, and then that would all be rather exciting, and then she'd probably go back to nice, boring Mr. Simpson.
She was just patiently waiting to be dumped. So let's talk about her role in the abdication crisis. So I believe that the myth is that Wallis forced King Edward to give up the throne, that she was behind him saying, "It's me, like I'm not, I refuse to be your side chick." Very modern term. But really, you just said it, that the Queen Mother would whisper in people's ears that, yeah, that she ran off with the future of the monarchy. Um, did Edward abdicate purely for love, or were there also political pressures, personality clashes, and government resistance to her as queen?
Well, there was a lot of things going on. I mean, it does remain one of the most fascinating sagas of the 20th century because men on the whole do not give up things for women. And he gave up ruling over two-thirds of the world's population when you think of the empire at that time for this woman who didn't seem to be particularly beautiful or special or unusual. Why did he do it?
In the end, Hugo Vickers paints Wallis Simpson not as a scheming villain, but as a misunderstood woman caught in a royal storm she never asked for. She wasn't power-hungry, just polite, charming, and slightly naive about how far Edward would go. Once he abdicated, she had no choice but to follow him into exile and make the best of it. That's a far cry from Meghan Markle, who, as Hugo and the host suggest, seems to have planned her exit from the start, and then turned it into a lucrative global brand. So when people lazily lump Wallis and Meghan together as the American duchesses who broke the royal mold, they are missing the deeper truth.
So my theory is if you read the letters that he wrote to Frida Dudley Ward, who was a long-time mistress, who actually I did meet in the 80s as well as when she was an old lady, you'll find plenty of evidence that he wanted to go, that he was fed up with his role, that he found it frustrating, and that he wanted to go out. Now, he loved the idea of America. And I think that subconsciously, and I don't think he would have admitted this, in Mrs. Simpson, he found in a sense an excuse to go. He must have realized that they wouldn't accept a woman with two husbands living as queen at that time. It was absolutely unacceptable. And on the other hand, that's what he did. And she didn't want him to abdicate. She thought he would be a good king. Indeed, when she actually heard the abdication speech, when she by that stage was down in the south of France, she was cowering under a rug. I have this description from Lord Brownlow to Cecil Beaton, cowering under a rug, thinking, this cannot happen, this must not happen, this is the worst situation that could possibly arise. Then, of course, what could she do? If somebody's abdicated for you, you can't just walk away. So obviously she married him. And then my reading of the situation, and I've really been studying this for decades now, is that she didn't want to marry him, but she made the best of it, and she looked after him very well. She fed him delicious food in beautiful surroundings, and did her best to keep him entertained. A man who had been totally busy all his life suddenly had nothing to do, nothing. Absolutely nothing to do. So there were many hours that need to be filled.
But Hugo, you do realize how much that sounds like Prince Harry using the woman as an excuse to leave, as an excuse to flee,
Well,
and then having a very packed schedule and all of a sudden having nothing to do but twiddle his thumbs.
well, yes, fair enough. That I agree with, but I
Yes.
think that Meghan Markle never intended to stay.
Right, right. Yes.
I think she wanted global recognition. She wanted status. I mean, we would not be talking about her unless she had married Prince Harry. Now, the Duchess of Windsor was completely different. She remained pretty quiet after that. I mean, okay, she wrote a book. It's actually a very civilized book. They did one or two very gentle interviews, but by and large, you really didn't hear from her again. Certainly not in the same way that Meghan Markle. I mean, I know that the media is different these days, but there was certainly no sort of promoting of herself. She was very much in the background. She created a beautiful house for him in Paris. She decorated it beautifully. She had lovely flowers. She had interesting people. She was a very good maîtresse de maison. She arranged the food was always absolutely delicious. I mean, everything about it was done at a very, very high level of sophistication. Now, one mistake perhaps that the Duchess of Windsor made was that she turned herself into the epitome of a royal duchess, much more elegant than our extremely elegant royal duchesses that we had over here in the United Kingdom. The Duchess of Kent and the Duchess of Gloucester, and they were very elegant ladies. But the Duchess of Windsor was yet more elegant than they were. And she created like a mini court in exile for him. I mean, if you went to the house in Paris, it was full of coronets, it was full of reminders of who he was. There were portraits of Queen Mary all over the place. And that, by the way, was also interesting. A lot of pictures of the Duke's mother, who had never ever received her. That's very dignified. You know, she might have said, I don't want this picture of this woman in the house. No, she appreciated he would miss his mother. So there were lots of pictures of her, lots of pictures of Queen Mary. And it was like, you know, the footmen they were always in livery. And when it was a special occasion, they put on their red uniforms. So many expatriates do that. They want to go away, and having gone away, they create in miniature the world that they'd left. And that's exactly what happened.
But
I'm
how
talking
did public perception wise, how does she make her? Because it sounds like you're saying her mistake public perception wise was being the most elegant duchess. Is it haute couture? Is it how she's dressing? Is it how does the
well,
public get a sense that she is this dignified, graceful, almost more duchess than a real duchess or
Wallis was a product of her time, trapped by duty and societal scandal. Meghan is a product of modern celebrity culture, driven by PR, image control, and media leverage. Both changed the monarchy in profound ways, but one did it quietly and tragically. The other did it loudly and intentionally. And maybe that's a real moral of Hugo Vickers's analysis. History repeats itself, but not always in the same tone. Wallis Simpson lived her life behind closed doors, her story twisted by myth. Meghan Markle, on the other hand, throws those doors wide open and invites Netflix to film the chaos. Two American women, two royal men desperate for escape, and two completely different legacies. Wallis built a house of grace in exile. Meghan built a media empire in California. Both may have captivated the world, but only one, in Hugo's eyes, did it with dignity.